I'm going to steal everybody's attention, interrupting all of the good conversations. The very first thing we're going to do is take a vote. Your options are start right now or give people 2 more minutes. Raise your hand for start right now. Raise your hand for give people 2 more minutes. All right, we'll give people 2 more minutes. It was very close. In the meantime, one thing that you might find useful to do is brainstorming what we call at CFAR a bugs list. Bug being a program metaphor, like the bug in the code. See if you can come up with places in your life where things snag, or opportunities you know are out there but you just haven't seized, things that have been bugging you, etc., etc. Think on that for a couple minutes and we'll get started. All right. Stealing everybody's attention again. Welcome to, I don't know, a talk, I guess. I was invited and I said yes, and I'm glad that there's more than like 2 people here. My name is Duncan Sabien. I'm from the Center for Applied Rationality. We're going to talk for about an hour and a half about applied rationality. I'm going to try to hand you a couple of useful tools you can take away. We're going to have a little bit of a fight. You guys can argue and ask questions and so forth. To start with, we're going to run a brief experiment. You are, of course, entirely welcome to not participate in said experiment, but of course you have to pretend like you're participating in it so that other people next to you don't know that you're unvirtuous. So the first thing that I'd like you to do is, you can close your eyes or not. Many people find it helpful to close your eyes. I want you to sort of check in on your body, just in the sense of like, okay, do I have absolutely 0 sensations in my body? Like maybe you feel the pressure of the seat against your legs. Maybe your feet feel tired or cramped by your shoes. Where are there feelings of hot? Where are there feelings of cold? Where are there feelings of tired or ache or tension? Take a couple deep breaths, see how that feels. One of the things that your body is useful for is that you have a lot of sort of implicit evolved systems that pay attention to what's going on around you in the environment. And sometimes if you notice, for instance, a feeling of tension, that can call your attention to data that you've taken in but not like become consciously aware of. So it's useful to use your body as kind of like a weather vane, check out what's going on. In particular, see if you have any sensations in your throat or in your chest. These are often places to look for feelings. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to have everybody who is participating in the experiment say out loud the sentence 2 + 2 = 5 while focusing on what you're saying and focusing on your body, on your throat, on your chest, and seeing where your body picks up with the like usually there's some part of you that physiologically reacts to telling a known falsehood. And I want to see if you can just like put your finger on that sensation. So if you are participating, on 3, I'll count up to 3, and then everybody who's participating will say 2 + 2 = 5, and see if you can notice something catch. 1, 2, 3. 2 + 2 = 5. For me, it's like right around here. There's a thing that's like, no, don't do it. Raise your hand if you got anything at all. Raise your hand if you got nothing. That's also okay. We're going to try another lie. Let's see. Okay, this time we're going to do a comparison, right? So, everybody who's willing, repeat after me. Today is Wednesday. Today is Wednesday. Okay, and now we're going to contrast that with today is Saturday.
Today is Saturday.
Any feeling anywhere? Raise your hand if you got something that time. Cool. All right, here comes the actual interesting part of the experiment. You are going to say out loud the sentence, everything in my life is going great. On your mark, get set, go.
Everything in my life is going great.
Raise your hand if you got something that caught or snagged or was like, ugh. Okay? Now I want you to think about what that thing is. Like, put a handle on it. Like, everything in my life is going great. Oh right, there's like that thing that's due on Wednesday of next week, right? And so now we're gonna like take whatever caught. We're going to set it aside. We're going to say, everything in my life is great except that, and see if anything else bubbles up. All right, so take the thing that first bubbled up, set it aside. Next, everything in my life is great except that. See if that sentence passes your body's like this is true test. On your mark, get set, go.
Everything in my life is great except that.
Raise your hand if you found something else. A couple of us. Cool. Okay, so the thing that we are going to do, I'm going to set a timer. We're going to run this quick experiment. Raise your hand if you can think of something in your life, maybe the thing that just popped up, or something in your life otherwise that's just like not perfect. Could be optimized, could be changed, could be improved. Raise your hand if you can think of one thing. Cool. Keep your hand up if you can think of at least 2 things. At least 3 things. All right. Pick one. Pick something off your list. Could be big, could be small. You're not going to have to share it publicly. Pick a thing off your list, a bug, a thing that you could fix. Everybody got one? Raise your hand if you don't have one. Cool. All right. I'm going to set a 4-minute timer. And what I want to have happen during the 4 minutes is condition on, at the end of the 4 minutes, this problem that you have, this thing that's not perfect, this like bug in your life, is gone. If at the end of the 4 minutes it was gone, what would you need to do during the 4 minutes? Like, would you need to just sit quietly and think about a thing? Or would you need to like frantically send an email, right? Would you need to buy something off Amazon? Would you need to like double check that like you didn't forget X, Y, or Z? Right? Conditional on 4 minutes from now your bug is solved. I'm going to give you 4 minutes. On your mark, get set, solve your problem now. If you have to leap up and leave the room, that's fine. Just be back in 3 minutes and 50 seconds. And time. Just out of curiosity, did anybody like knock out a problem actually? You just solved it? Yeah? If you didn't knock out a problem, don't feel bad. Turns out many problems actually take more than 4 minutes to solve. But it's always worthwhile to check. What I'd like to do now is have you sort of mentally review what your brain did over the past 4 minutes. Think about like how your thoughts moved, what your mind tried to do. And in particular, I want you to think about what percentage of what you did over the last 4 minutes you endorse as having actually been useful and productive. Where useful and productive is defined as you define it. Like for instance, if you're exhausted and you didn't feel like tackling a problem and all your brain did was like come up with sarcastic jokes, you might actually endorse that as like a wise decision given how tired you are. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So think about the last 4 minutes. What percentage of what your mind did you endorse? Anybody's brain do everything right for 4 minutes straight? 100%? 1. Nice. I'm going to get a darker marker here. How about 90%? Raise your hand if you endorse 90% of what your brain did. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 80%? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 70%? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-ish. 60. 1, 2. 50? 1, 2. 40? 1, 2. 30? 20? 1, 2. 10? 0. Okay. So this is applied rationality, I posit. This idea that like our brains do things when we have goals, and some of the things that they do are good, and some of the things that they do are bad, and in general, we would like to push this whole process this way. As another example, I'm going to give you, if you want to look this up, this is the Wason 4-card task. How many of you know this thing already? Sweet, only one person has had it spoiled. All right, imagine that I hand you these 4 cards. This is a different problem, we'll do that in a minute. These are 4 cards that can be flipped over. One side has a number, one side has a color. In case anybody in the audience is red, green, colorblind, I helpfully wrote red and green because I'm a friendly person. How many cards would you need to flip over to conclusively investigate the claim? If odd on one side, then red on the other. So you want to either prove or disprove. If odd, then red, right? How many cards, which cards do we need to flip to check this claim? It could be that we need to flip all 4. Could be that we need to flip only 1. Take a moment to think, form your own opinion. Or whisper if forming your own opinion is scary. If odd, then red.
So you're assuming that all the cards have a number on one side and a color on the other side, right?
Yes, they do all have a number on one side and a color on the other in this experiment. I'm not a liar in this experiment. Raise your hand if you have an opinion. Just like blurt some, how many cards do we need to flip over?
2.
2? Anybody disagree?
Well, are there other rules other than that, or is there just one rule?
Well, this is the only rule that we're investigating. There may be other rules, but that's the only one we're checking. Okay, hold your opinion in your head. I'm going to give you a different problem. This time you are a police officer who is going to a bar quite near to a college campus, and it is your job to make sure that everyone is following underage drinking laws. So, in other words, we're investigating, this time we're investigating the proposition, if alcohol, then 21 plus. Haha. Right? So you walk into this bar, you see 4 people. 1 you don't know. You can see that they are clearly drinking water. 1 is known to you. You're not sure what they're drinking, but you can see that they are 30. You know them. You know that they're 35 years old. Another one is known to you. You know this person is 16. You can't tell what they're drinking. And another person, you don't know them, but it's pretty clear to you that they are drinking scotch. What checks do you need to do to confirm that everyone is complying with the law? How many checks and who do you need to check? Like whose IDs do you need to check or whose drinks do you need to check? Form an opinion? Yeah, blurt out?
2.
Cool. So regardless of whether you found, maybe you found both of these problems easy, maybe you found both of these problems hard. Raise your hand if this seemed relatively easier for you to answer than this. Yeah. Did you guys notice that they're the exact same problem? So there's kind of this weird thing going on where, like, once we frame it in this social, like, cheaty mechanism way, suddenly this problem becomes almost trivial. Who do we need to check? Check what this guy's drinking and check how old this person is, right? Because it doesn't matter how old this person is, doesn't matter what this person's drinking. Similarly over here, which cards do we need to flip?
Red and green.
Wait, which ones?
Red and green.
We need to flip red and green?
No, green and green.
3 and green. Does anybody disagree? Yeah.
Red and
Red and 3? Anybody else disagree? Any other disagree? Yeah.
I think if there's other rules, you just have to flip 3, because you could flip over red and it could be something else.
Yeah. So in fact, and I can clarify this a little bit later if you need to, the 2 that we need to flip over are these 2. We need to flip over this one to make sure that it is not odd. Because if it is odd on the back, then we have a problem. Right? If it was an odd card that led to green, then our rule is false. And we need to flip over this one to make sure that it is definitely red. It actually doesn't matter with this one, because if it's an even number on the back, then it's irrelevant to our rule. And if it's an odd number on the back, then it worked. And we actually don't need to worry about this one because it's an even number, irrelevant to our rule. But this contrast between these 2 problems, this is applied rationality. It's finding out which parts of your brain are strong under which circumstances, and then allocating your resources accordingly. You have emotions, you have intuitions, you have Google, you have areas of expertise, you have your own personal anecdotes, you have studies and things that you've read. All of these can be thought of as like different advisors, right? There's meta, you are the king or queen or monarch of your brain, and then you've got like, this is your intuitions, this is your anecdotes, this is Google, this is your friend Steve, who knows a lot, right? Like you've got all these different advisors, and you need to know when to listen to which one. Because actually you can get a lot of things right, but if you just like always only listen to your intuitions, then in areas where your intuitions tend to be weak and fallible, you're gonna run into trouble. And if you always only do like slow, cautious, careful reasoning, then when your car starts to skid on ice, you're gonna be screwed. Right? So this is applied rationality in like air quotes. It means looking at your brain, looking at how your brain works, and choosing to use the strengths and weaknesses of your brain to like cover patches, right? Your intuition's really good and really valuable, don't throw it out. Your emotions are really good and really valuable, don't throw them out. Your reasoning is really good and really valuable, don't throw it out. But each one of these has holes. Like each one is like a slice of Swiss cheese. You wanna like hold up the Swiss cheese slices and like turn them and layer them until there are no holes all the way through. Questions on this so far? Cool. All right, so CFAR, Center for Applied Rationality, it's an organization just down the street on Addison Street. We run 4.5-day workshops for people that intro them to a handful of applied rationality techniques based on heuristics and biases literature, based on case studies of people doing things really right or really wrong, based on things like the sequences, our own anecdotal data. Those workshops are super awesome. You should come to them if you can. They are expensive. They cost $3,900, but there is financial aid available for awesome people like you, who are students in the effective altruism movement, or like students who are going to go have an impact in the world. If you can't make it to a workshop, you should go here and download our handbook. I have provided our handbook to all of you. It's like 200 pages long. It's full of a ton of awesome content. But you should not read it if you're going to go to a workshop, because it kind of like, you know the thing where you like show up thinking that you already know it all, and then it's like really hard to actually learn. So you should totally read this if you can't go to a workshop, because it's a great 80-20. But if you think you're going to go to a workshop, you should like hold it in your back pocket. So in our 4.5-day workshops, we teach people a whole bunch of techniques. Those techniques are like each individual algorithms for solving a certain kind of problem or correcting a certain kind of flaw. In fact, we sort of already did one. We did resolve cycles just a minute ago. The point of the workshop, though, is not these techniques. Any of you ever learned how to program? Yeah? You learn how to do like quick sort, right? And then odds are when you get a job, you're never ever going to have to know how to use quicksort. Why do they make you practice quicksort? Any theories? No theories. Any of you ever learned how to dance or like a martial art? Yeah? You have to like learn how to do this thing, right? There's a way in which, as you're learning dance or learning martial arts or learning programming, they give you these exercises and they give you these patterns. And you might, if you're not careful, be tricked into thinking like, ah, okay, I know what martial arts is. Martial arts is doing like this, and then like this, and then like this, right? But this is not the point of martial arts. The point of martial arts is like being able to fight. And similarly, programming is not like, I can do fizz buzz, right? Programming, you like do a whole bunch of exercises and algorithmic practice and like learn about all sorts of things. But the ultimate point is to learn to like think like a programmer. And this is why your 5th language is much easier to learn than your 1st. Similarly, we have a whole bunch of rationality techniques. You'll see like 30 of them in that handbook. But the techniques are not the thing that we want you to learn. What we want you to learn is how to think like a rationalist, if this makes sense. So in this talk, I'm going to give you the beginnings of 3 techniques. But I actually don't want you to pay too much attention to like whether or not you've got those things down. Instead, what I want you to do is squint at like what's behind them, or like what caused us to invent them, or like what problem were we trying to solve, or like what hole were we trying to plug. Because it takes an hour to to learn each of those, and then we make people practice them for like 4 days at our workshop, and we're going to spend like 10 minutes on each one. So you're not going to get those things, but you might get the generator behind them, and that's the useful thing to take away. Yeah?
That link is dead.
Dead?
The first letter is an I.
It's a capital I.
Oh.
It's a capital I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Good catch. Thank you.
I trained one in L first.
Is that link alive?
Yes.
Yep.
Sweet. Okay. So, yeah.
Can I get those chips?
Yes. Problem solving. All right. So shifting into like lecture mode, I'm going to try to teach you a thing called trigger action planning. If you're interested in the citations and or the further reading, what you want to look up is implementation intentions. Implementation intentions are awesome. There are hundreds of studies, large effect sizes, things like 0.6 standard deviations, even 6 months out after you intervene on someone's behavior with implementation intentions. Super cool. When we tried to teach them in our workshops, everybody refused to learn them. We changed their name to TAPS, and suddenly everybody thought they were super cool and started learning them. So I'm going to call them TAPS. But if you want to look up implementation intention. A TAP, a trigger action. So it starts with trigger action patterns, and we turn the patterns into trigger action plans. So first, we want to understand the thing that our brain is doing, and then we want to use that new understanding to like be able to accomplish our goals. With me so far? All right, I'm going to tell you a story about a bug. This bug is called the Sphex wasp. And the Sphex wasp, it's like a burrowing wasp. It lives in like a little hole in the ground where it likes to come and bring, you know, like paralyzed crickets, because it's like a nice, horrible nightmare sort of thing. And the Sphex wasp was doing a thing that 20th century entomologists found intriguing. It would go out, it would paralyze the cricket, it would drag the cricket back to its burrow, it would leave the cricket outside of its burrow. It would go inside, kind of like poke around, make sure like they theorized it was looking to make sure that like no predators had moved in, or like no collapses had happened. It would then come back out, grab the cricket, drag it inside. This was astonishing because this thing has like nowhere near enough neurons to have any business behaving strategically or like conceiving of a future in which like, wait a second, I should check inside before I bring my food in because I don't want anybody to steal it. It's like impossible. So the scientists, who are cruel and capricious, conceived of an experiment to falsify their hypothesis that the Sphex wasp was thinking strategically. It dragged the cricket, left it on the doorstep, went inside. Scientists took the cricket and moved it 30 centimeters, form a hypothesis about what happened next. Sphex wasp came outside, looked around, it's a beautiful day, went into hunting mode, and then like 10 seconds later, oh sweet, a cricket, already paralyzed. Brought it back to the doorstep, went inside. Our scientists moved the cricket 30 centimeters. Lather, rinse, repeat. The wasp just kept doing this over and over and over again. Further experiments with other wasps proved that this wasn't like an infinite loop. Sometimes after like 5 or 6 iterations, the wasp would just be like, fine, and finally drag it inside. But the conclusion was that rather than having a brain that was doing something like this, right? The Sphex wasp instead had a whole series of if-then patterns. And in fact, these if-then patterns could chain into each other productively, mimicking strategic behavior. But it was basically like, if outside and no cricket, go hunting. If cricket, drag back to burrow. If outside burrow with cricket, drop on doorstep and go inside. If inside, check things out. If you're inside and you're hungry, go outside. Right? There's like all of these sort of chains. Turns out, rather depressingly, we do exactly the same thing a disgusting majority of the time. You guys feel the like, I have to do it! Right? Or if any of you have ever been driving and you're not in the left turn lane, you're in the lane to go forward, right? You're at a stoplight, you're in the lane to go forward, and the left turn arrow like flashes on and your foot comes off the brake. This is because we have in our like, we have millions and millions. at least thousands, possibly millions of these, like either hardwired into our brain or evolved from experience, like over our own lifetime. And many of us have this thing that like, see flash of green in our visual field, time to go, right? This is like one of our tasks. Any of you that have been eating snacks, how hard were you trying to eat your snacks just now? Versus like, how many of you have a tap that's just sort of like, chips in front of you, grab chip. And there's like chip in hand, put chip in mouth. And this is happening entirely without your conscious control, right? Okay, yeah. So the thing here, having this sort of autopilot is fantastic because cognition is extremely resource intense. If you had to actively focus on everything that you were doing all of the time, you would immediately become exhausted, right? Having the autopilot is actually awesome. I'm not saying that your autopilot is bad, but occasionally your autopilot can lead you astray, such as when you notice that you have eaten an entire package of Oreos without meaning to, right? Or if you ever find yourself in the situation where like, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. And you? I'm fine. And you? Just like get caught in these snarls. Or raise your hand if you've ever sort of failed at installing a new habit or like a New Year's resolution, not because you didn't want to, but because you literally just forgot. And like 6 weeks later, you're like, oh crap, I was going to do that, but like it didn't happen. So what we want to do with our autopilot is we want to have some of these be a thing that turns the autopilot off. It turns out we can just do this. We can install a function in our autopilot that turns our autopilot off. I have a colleague who likes to refer to this as a summon sapiens spell. She was driving down the highway one day and just completely not paying attention to what she's doing, because most of the time when you're driving down the highway, you don't have to pay attention to what you're doing. You just kind of like check your mirrors, talk to your friend, change the radio. And then all of a sudden, there was a fridge in the road that had like fallen off a truck. And she reported the experience of suddenly becoming conscious again. And like, she was like, and like, what? Like, suddenly her attention was turned off. And this is what I posit trigger action planning is for on the first level. You can like use this technique in a bunch of novel and interesting ways. But the first tap that I want you guys to have is one that turns your brain on. So for instance, we used to have, as a part of our workshop, a lesson where we would say, okay, if you want to exercise more frequently, try to do little things. Like when you get to the office, take the stairs instead of the elevator, right? And so people would try to install a tap. When I get to the office, I will take the stairs. Take 30 seconds and brainstorm how this failed for everybody. Failed for almost everybody. See if you can figure it out. Suggestions? Yeah. They forgot? So like when I got to the office, just like didn't fire?
There's no stairs at the place when they connected there at the office.
Yeah, your brain wakes up, but there's like nothing for you to do with all of this awareness.
They started talking to people who got in the elevator.
Yes, social pressure. Other things? Yeah.
Yeah, so they were just on autopilot and ended up in their office and they're like, oh, I forgot to take the stairs.
Yeah, one of the common failure modes was like, the actual thing that they installed was like, when on the 3rd floor, passing to the 4th floor, feel guilty about not taking the stairs. Because it was counterproductive. So the change, there's a couple of things that we need here in order to make a tap. So we need a trigger, we need an action. The trigger needs to be specific and concrete and reliable, right? So something like when I get to the office wasn't quite any of these things, but a trigger like when I feel the metal of the door handle in my left hand, right? Like that's like visual kinesthetic, or sorry, sensory kinesthetic for me. I like know what this feels like in the way that I don't know what getting to the office feels like. And the action needs to be atomic, like it's one thing, not a chain of 6 different things. So like if you're talking to somebody, being like, hey, I'm doing this thing where we take the stairs, you want to come with me? Like that's like a 5-step process to get you to take the stairs. Specs Wasp could never do it, right? And the other thing is effortless. So what we did was we had people, when I feel the metal of the door in my left hand, I will look at the stairs. Like that was the whole pattern. In this way, it wasn't like I was trying to turn myself into a robot. Instead, what I was trying to do was like have a little dialogue box pop up. It was like, bloop, you wanted to take the stairs. Do you want to take the stairs? Right? And then I could decide yes or no, right? So instead of forgetting every single day, I installed this tap. I sort of like, okay, I'm gonna like visualize it. I'm gonna mime it. Okay. When I feel the metal in my hand, what was that? I was gonna do something. What was it? Oh right, I was gonna look at the stairs, right? And then like repeat. Okay, I'm walking up to the office, feel the metal of the door in my hand, look at the stairs, right? And I just sort of do this a few times. And then what happens is, I have like data gathered over the course of a week, and if I took the stairs 6 out of 7 times, then like success, victory, I'm done. It like worked. And if I only took the stairs once and the other 6 times, I was like, no. Then I have a problem that can't be solved by taps, and I need a different tool. Does this make sense to everybody so far? Okay, so homework assignment, right, or not homework assignment. We're going to take 2 minutes right now, and what I want you to do is skim through your life for a place where you would benefit from more awareness. A place where, like, there's a good timeline and a bad timeline, and like here's you going about your day, and you end up over here, right? And instead, you want to end up over here, and maybe you usually notice like right here, and then it would take a tremendous amount of effort to get you all the way back up to the good timeline. Instead, I want you to look for something here before the bad thing even starts to happen, or like right here at the moment where you got diverted, or like right here where you ended up on the wrong track, but like it's still pretty easy to correct. Raise your hand if you're not sure what I'm asking you to look for. And you want to add, anybody have a question?
Would it be like a moment where you feel something went wrong? Or?
Yeah, you could totally have the moment where you like notice like, oh, I was supposed to do the thing, but like now I'm like already 12 steps out of my room. I can't go back. Right? Also notice, sorry, actually this reminds me. Triggers being specific, concrete, and reliable, that's to you. Some people like you don't have to be able to explain it. It could just be like, oh, there's that feeling that I have that's like, and like I can't tell you what that feeling is, but I recognize it every time I feel it. Does that make sense? So we're looking for triggers that already exist, times that we already notice something. Like, right, things that already catch our attention. So we're not looking for like, I could set my phone reminder to do X, Y, or Z. We're looking for things that already noticed. Like I already noticed the feeling of the door in my hand. It was like a salient trigger. I have friends who already notice when they hear the word should in their own internal monologue. They just like, every time they hear that, they notice. So, look through your list of times in your life, your daily life, when you end up someplace that you don't like, you don't endorse, and then pick one, and start looking for these points here. We're going to take 2 minutes. Go. Halfway. Anybody have a question? Yeah.
Yeah. What about cases where when the difference between the happy and the sad face isn't too much? Like, you know, you're typing an essay and your hands are like Control-T Facebook.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it doesn't take more than 10 seconds to realize and close it, but if you do it like 100 times within a paragraph, then you don't get anything done.
I actually have a specific thought on that. I'll get to that as soon as we're done with this next step. I'll come back to it. Okay, turn to somebody next to you, or not if you're an introvert and don't feel like pushing against it today. Swap back and forth. Like in 20 seconds, say the thing you're trying to break and the trigger that you found. Go. like a particularly juicy example they want to share?
What do you want?
Nobody. It's hard to be brave. Yeah.
Yeah, so what like I'll oftentimes just like be on autopilot and then like walk into the pizza store in my place. So I guess like my proposed solution to this is the trigger will be like walking in and seeing pizza.
Yeah.
Like really seeing that. And then I'm not quite sure what. So we're just looking for that moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The moment where you like wake up.
So for me it would be that.
Cool. I like it. Notice that like, yeah, like when you get there and you're like, I want pizza, you like notice that you're about to eat some pizza. You don't actually have to like not eat pizza.
Yeah.
That's like not strictly the thing. Instead, we're just like raising the question or the option. You're like, oh yeah, I notice I'm about to sort of automatically eat pizza again. Do I want to eat pizza on purpose instead of automatically? Yes, sweet, pizza. Like, you don't have to, you don't, at least with TAPS 101, right? Like I'm giving you guys the intro 101 version of the technique. You can in fact install a tap that's like, notice you don't want to take the stairs. Take the stairs anyway. This actually just works. In fact, one of the studies on this list was exactly that. But yeah, so there's a thing here though about the noticing response, right? Like you click into Facebook when you're supposed to be writing, and you're like, I clicked into Facebook. One of the things that TAPS is really good for is closing the loop. And what I mean by that is, like, you find yourself on Facebook when you were supposed to be writing your paper. And you sort of like wake up. You're like, like here I am on Facebook again. Like, when did that happen? How did that happen? The thing to do there is to like pat yourself on the back, like yay for noticing. Because if you like beat yourself up over it, you're literally disincentivizing the noticing because of like hyperbolic discounting, and the thing that's most proximal to the punishment you just dealt yourself is like noticing, so you'll cease noticing. There's a whole class on that. But like the thing to do there is like pat yourself on the back, I noticed that I'm on Facebook, and then like see how much you can reconstruct of the previous 30 seconds. Like see if you can, like, okay, I'm like vaguely going back, I don't remember what caused me to get on Facebook. I don't remember. But that's fine. And then like you keep that up, notice, review, and what happens empirically is that the like distance between the trigger that put you on Facebook and you noticing that you're on Facebook just over time happens to shrink until eventually you find yourself in a place where you're like, I noticed I just opened Facebook. What was happening 10 seconds ago? Oh right, feelings of existential dread and despair. And now you can build a new tap, right? Now you have a new tap, which is like feelings of existential dread and despair. Ask myself if a Facebook break would help. Does this make sense? But you have to be patient with yourself. Like you won't get there if you're like, well, it's been a week, I've been noticing myself on Facebook, but Duncan lied to me, this isn't gonna work, right? Like, the way that I first got excited about implementation intentions was that I read a study in which it was as effective as an intervention for ADHD middle schoolers as medication. Which, like, holy shit, like what? Assume that things which affect, explain, and motivate humans also affect, explain, and motivate you. Like if this works for ADHD middle schoolers, it probably works for you. And if it doesn't work for you, that probably means that I like conveyed something wrong and we need to like tinker with the process, as opposed to like your brain is just like magically immune to this wonderful technique. Make sense so far? Okay, so you guys came up with some like theoretical taps where you like notice a place for intervention. We're gonna take 30 more seconds and I want you to just mentally rehearse, right? Or another thing you could do, the actual original implementation intention was people would just write down on a sheet of paper their intention. And this was like that's the whole technique. When I get to the office, I will take the stairs. So take 30 seconds, ingrain your new intention in whatever way works for you. And combo move, imagine that it's 2 weeks from now, and your like new trigger and new action just totally failed. Didn't work at all. How surprised are you? Like out of 10. Shout out a number. How surprised out of 10 are you?
2.
1, 2. Yeah. What happened? Tell me the story. Just, like you don't have to actually shout it, but like in your head, like, oh, it's 2 weeks from now. It totally didn't work. Why not? I bet you can invent a story. Raise Raise your hand if like a trivially obvious reason why it didn't work came to mind. Yeah, okay, so homework, plug that hole, right? Like whatever it is that was gonna cause it to go wrong, come up with a tap that fixes that. Make sense? All right, switching gears, goal factoring. I'm going to put up an example of two currencies that we often accrue and exchange. I'm not talking in terms of dollars and pounds and yen and pesos, but that is the metaphor. That's the metaphor that I'm using. So the two most common currencies that we exchange are money and time. Give me some more currencies. Blurt them out.
Energy.
Energy.
Interaction.
Be a little more specific.
Human interaction with other humans.
Yeah, okay. Can I lump that as like social?
Yeah.
So I was just going to say social interaction. Okay.
Beauty.
Beauty, yes. You can acquire it. You can lose it. You can do things with it.
Service.
Service, more specifically?
Generosity.
Yeah, okay. Generosity, effort on behalf of others. Others?
Happiness.
I heard sleep. I heard happiness. How many of you have ever made the sacrifice of you exchanged a little sleep and happiness for a better grade? Yeah? So happiness is definitely a currency, at least sometimes, and then grades. I'm actually going to strike out grades, and I'm going to put like a broader category of reputation. Right? Like grades are a specific instantiation of reputation that are like within the framework of the university. Others?
Attention.
Attention, yeah, that's the one that often doesn't make it on the list, but it's super important. One more.
Achievement, let's say. So it's like everyone agrees.
Yeah, I like it. Cool. All right. So as promised, I'm not going to teach you goal factoring because it's more complicated than we have time to go into. But I am going to give you the thing that would allow you to invent goal factoring if you want. Okay? One of my colleagues has a joke where she asks the workshop participants, she's like, okay, we ran out of time. I can either tell you when to use the technique or I can tell you how to use the technique. Which one do you want?
Wow.
Good, intelligent, capable people can in fact disagree on this question. I personally like how, or sorry, not, I'm very tired. I personally prefer when to how, and here's why. If I notice every time the bad thing happens, it like never escapes my attention, then I feel like I can construct my own fix, my own patch. So I'm going to give you the when, and then if you want the how, I gave you the handbook, or you can ask questions later, and I'll be happy to describe. But when you want to use goal factoring is when you notice a feeling of tornness, or when you have like an upcoming choice where both sides seem kind of bad. So like the example that my colleague uses, the example that my colleague invented the technique for was he was working in one city and teaching in another city and also trying to juggle a long distance relationship and a startup. And he found that grading his students' work was just awful. It like didn't feel worthwhile. It took up this huge chunk of time. It felt tedious. Didn't feel like it was actually accomplishing his goals, right? So his options were like continue grading papers and feel like he's wasting his time and like life is terrible, or stop grading his students' work and like get fired, maybe get censured, maybe like no longer be a professor, right? Both of these options were kind of bad, right? Another similar example is it's like 4 o'clock in the afternoon on Friday, and you've been like looking forward to going home and just like vegging out with some Netflix or video games, and like there's like a whole roll of cookie dough you've been saving for just this occasion. And then somebody calls you up or like sends you a message, they're like, hey, there's a thing happening, you should come, it's gonna be great. And then in that moment you're like, oh, why did you give me a good opportunity? Like if it was a bad opportunity, I could have just been like, nope, and then I would have just gone home. But you've given me a good opportunity, and now everything's terrible, right? This is like to go to the party or to stay home in your pajamas, you like have this tornness, this sense that like both options are good but incomplete. This is when you use goal factoring, right? So here is the theory. Here is the theory. Most of our actions do not get us exactly what we want. In fact, usually there's like a chain of things where we do A because it gets B, because B gets C, because C gets D, because D gets E, because E gets happiness. Like there's this long chain, right? So like, we go to the party maybe because we want to meet somebody there, or maybe because we want free food and drink, or like maybe because we want a self-image of not being a shut-in, right? But each of those three things is not like a terminal goal in and of itself, right? Like we want to feel like we're not a shut-in because feeling like a shut-in means that we're lame, and if we're lame, then we're never going to be happy in life. There's like this long chain. With me so far? So the idea here is that with each action we take, we are making purchases of some form or another. Going to the party buys us something. Grading our students' papers buys us something. What do you buy as a professor by grading papers? What things do you buy? What things does grading papers get for you that's good? Yeah?
Future career as a professor, or at least you need one.
Yes, not being fired. What else? Yeah.
Reputation, your students are like, this professor actually grades papers quickly.
Yes. Students like give a thumbs up for you, right? They rate you well on professor rating sites. Yeah.
Is there a feeling of superiority?
Yes. if your students are doing well and everybody else's students are doing badly, like you're objectively the best, right? What else? One thing that comes up, it actually gives you feedback on how your classes are working. Like if you care about being a good professor, that matters, right? Another thing that often comes up, it can like motivate your students, right? So basically we've got this circle here called grading, right? And grading is giving us all these good things. It's giving us reputation, it's giving us feedback, it's giving us not getting fired, right? It's motivating our students maybe, right? Like grading is giving us all of these good things, right? And what are the bad things about grading? Have any of you ever graded a thing? Yeah? What's bad about having to grade papers?
Time and energy.
Yeah. Takes up time. This is like a blocking arrow indicating that like this does not, like not a good thing. Takes up your time. Yeah?
If a lot of people aren't doing well on it, I feel really bad having people in that grade.
Ah, the painful truth. Right? Painful truth says don't grade. Right? Other things? Yeah. Yeah. They can like sap your happiness, right? So the goal factoring technique is an attempt to resolve this. In short, you want to like break reality into its constituent parts and see if there's a way to cheat. See if there's a way to purchase these things without paying quite so much of these things. Pain. Right? So basically, like my colleague was pouring happiness and pain and time into this process that was purchasing all of these good things, right? But he wanted to investigate to see if maybe there was a way to get those things cheaper. And what he did was he went like this. He literally went like this. I like actually recommend that you go like this. Kind of like opens up your mental spaces a little bit. And he had things like, okay, I could pay my students not to tell that I didn't grade. Or I could like only accept grad students who already know the material into my classes. Or I could randomly assign grades and then like deal with the complaints individually. And I bet there won't be very many complaints, right? Or I could grade the first assignment and then for every future assignment just give them like that grade plus half a point, right? Or he came up with all these schemes, right? He also came up with schemes that were non-evil, right? Such as I could do away with grades and have my students like just sort of take the class and evaluate on their own how they're doing. I could have my students grade their own work. I could switch to tests that are like more objectively and quickly checkable. Right? Like I could pay somebody else to do the grading for me, like not in a corrupt and debauched way, but like I could actually just hire a professional to do the grading. Right? Like I could trade money and get back time. And by going through this process of breaking apart reality, there's a trap that people fall in. Our handle for it is essentialism. How many of you have ever gone to the gym? Yeah? Raise your hand if the like platonic ideal of like going to the gym. Raise your hand if that's good. Raise your hand if it's bad. Yeah. Most of us have this like cash sense of like going to the gym is either good or bad. But in point of fact, there is no like going to the gym experience, right? Like what's going to the gym made of?
Sweating your ass off, doing something to get stronger.
Sweat.
Or whatever.
Yeah, it's made of sweat, it's made of goals, it's made of time, it's made of smells, it's made of like other people being around you, it's made of like music blasting, it's made of like the clothes that you have to wear, it's made of the clothes that you maybe have to buy, it's made of like opportunity costs in terms of the other thing that you're not doing while you're going to the gym, right? Like going to the gym is made up of all these things. And often people find that like, I hate going to the gym, I haven't been going to the gym even though I think that I should. And it turns out that like, oh, if I just went to the gym when there were half as many people, it would be like 3 times as pleasant. Does it make sense? Or sometimes the reverse is true. Someone's like, I keep going to the gym at like 10 o'clock at night and there's nobody there and I get demotivated. I need to go when there are like hulking, like glistening guys walking around to like motivate me, right? So this again is goal factoring. This idea of like breaking it apart, breaking it into pieces and seeing if you can like rearrange the pieces. Are you all is anybody not familiar with the word arbitrage? Cool, it's worth explaining then. Arbitrage is when a commodity is being bought and sold here for $20, and it's being bought and sold over here for $10, and I have $10. So what I should do is I should buy some. I should go over here and sell it for $20, and I should take my $20, and I should buy twice as much. And I should go over here, and I should sell it, and then I should take my $40, and I should buy twice as much, and like eventually the prices will equalize, right? But like anytime you see an opportunity to buy something cheaper one place than the other, like stop buying it in the expensive place. And similarly, my colleague Val was buying reputation and feedback and not getting fired and motivating his students way more expensively than he needed to. And his ultimate solution was to create tests where his students had 2 pens, a black pen and a red pen, and he would project one question and they would do their work in black pen, and then he would say, pens down, pick up your red pen, and then he would project the answer, and they would grade their own work right that second, and then he would say, all right, next question, pick up your black pen, and then just like loop through this. He did 0 grading, and he could just like skim through his tests real quick to see how his students were doing. His students also got immediate feedback on like what mistakes they were making and how it was going. It was win-win for everyone, vastly better, so he invented a technique called goal factoring to make everybody do it. Okay? Any questions there? All right, again, if you want more information about goal factoring, look in that handbook or like bother me with questions in the future. Yeah.
It's not obvious to me how I could find ways to arbitrage in this way. So if I realize that I'm treating all these things for like whatever, like I'm trying to get certain currencies, I'm putting in too much currencies. How do I go about actually finding cheaper ways to do it?
Yeah, so one of the key pieces of goal factoring that I sort of glossed over is the way that you actually goal factor is you scheme independently about each variable. So he's like, okay, ignore everything else, I just want to maximize reputation. What can I do that would like cause my students to like me and rate me highly? And he brainstormed a bunch of solutions there. And then he said, okay, ignore everything else, what can I do to maximize feedback? Like how can I tell how my students are doing? And he brainstormed a bunch of stuff there, and a bunch of stuff there, and a bunch of stuff there. And then he did the thing where he was like, that's everything that I need to get out of grading. If I got only these things and never graded, I'd be happy. And then he noticed like some other stuff bubbled up of like, oh right, there's also like following the rules so that my supervisor thinks I'm a good teacher. Right, which I guess is I kind of already drew it on the board. But the thing that you do is you like brainstorm for each of these independently, and this is sort of a different mental frame. You're not thinking about grading as this monolithic structure. You're like deliberately putting yourself in a very small, constrained, different box. And what happens is you get like 5 lists of things, and you can check and see if there's a composite strategy that hits all of them. But maybe in point of fact, actually the thing that you were already doing is the most efficient thing. The point of goal factoring is largely just that it forces you to consider all of the options. It's sort of like, have any of you ever like assigned mathematical weights to different options in a problem? You actually like wrote out like, okay, I'm gonna say this is 10 points and this is 50 points, and you like wrote all the considerations. And then at the end of it, you just like threw out the numbers and went with your gut anyway. this is correct. Goal factoring like forces you to consider all the things, so that instead of following, you like skip to the end every time. Like I have to do grading, I have to. That's just how it is. That's just like how the world works. This like bumps you out of that frame and makes you like see the whole map, and then you go from there. So you're correct. It's not obvious. You won't always find a better plan, but just like forcing yourself to actually take seriously the possibility. I'm totally talking out of my butt here, but based off like anecdotal data from our 700 alumni thus far, I would assume that this provides like useful dividends something like 40% of the time, which means that it's like, and usually like, so that means that 1 out of every 3 times you goal factor, you'll find like some new and interesting solution, which to me says it's like worth doing as a habit. That was a good question. Any other questions? All right. Changing one more time. Okay, double crux. Raise your hand if you already know what double crux is. Cool. Okay. So again, I'm not going to really tell you how to double crux. I'm going to give you the generator of it and hopefully put a bee in your bonnet and cause you to go out and do the thing that invents double crux on its own. Okay. I don't have a black marker, but I'm going to use the phrase black box anyway. Deal with it. In many ways, you can think of a human being as a black box that takes in universe and outputs beliefs, decisions, actions, qualities, ideas. I'm going to sum all of that up as triangle. Okay. And other people may also be conceived of as a black box. Their black box also takes in universe. And like some processing goes on in this black box. It's not really opaque. We have access to a lot of what goes on in our head. But there's a lot of stuff that goes on under the surface that we're not sure about. It's like a dark gray box, like a translucent box, right? And those other people also output beliefs, opinions, ideas, actions. I'm going to sum those up as circle. And now we have a problem, right? Because clearly the right answer is triangle, and like this joker over here thinks the right answer is circle, right? There's a failure mode that goes on when we disagree with people. Double crux is a technique for navigating intellectual disagreement. There's a couple failure modes here. One, often we get into the failure mode where people just bash their conclusions against each other, like progressively harder and harder. So like I say triangle, and you're like circle, and I'm like triangle, and you're like circle, and then I'm like triangle. This is particularly obvious in things like our current political discourse, or arguments over which sports team is best, right? Like raise your hand if you've ever been in an argument that took this form. Keep your hand up if it was worthwhile and you had fun. Once in a while, it is fun to just shout, right? But there's a broader principle here, which is you want to adopt truth-seeking methods that work. Like, you want to adopt methods that work in the presence of truth and break in the presence of falsehood. In this kind of fight, often, like, the way this actually pans out is whoever is loudest wins. Raise your hand if you think that's a good way to, like, resolve all policy debates. There's only one troll. So like we all know that who is loudest is not a good discriminator of truth and falsehood, right? Like the person who's wrong could easily be the person who's loud, right? Interestingly enough, a more subtle form of this is we will resolve the disagreement by saying that whoever is the most eloquent is right. Notice like a small sense of fear there. Like eloquence is often correlated with intelligence and clear seeing, but not at all a guarantee. Like in fact, a more eloquent person can easily be like wrong or evil or whatever. So we want to adopt a method that will solve that. We want to adopt a method that will actually move us toward the truth, because I'm making a bold assumption here. Everybody in this room cares about the truth, and even if we might like locally want to hide from it because it hurts to find out that we're wrong, like on reflection, we'd all rather find out that we're wrong and then move on, like in better knowledge. So we want to fix this. We want to get rid of that like bashing. The other thing that often happens in this sort of disagreement is that people will go ahead and choose to take their disagreement as evidence that the other person's black box is broken, right? I think triangle, you think circle, therefore you must be bad at thinking, right? I have done this, I'm ashamed of it, but I did it. Raise your hand if you've ever done this to some other human being. Yeah, raise your hand if it's ever been done to you. Yeah, kind of sucks. So we're trying to break that dynamic as well. We want to skip the dynamic where we end up assuming the other person is bad wrong, right? And the third thing that happens is we take this as evidence that the other person doesn't actually see the universe clearly, right? They're blind, they're biased. You guys ever heard the phrase, bias, the study of how other people think? Right? So double crux is a technique to fix these three problems. And where it starts is by understanding the cruxes of your own belief. We use the word crux as in like the crux of the argument. It's the same root as crucial. It's like the crucial piece. So let's say I have a belief. I'm not actually representing my true beliefs here or being hypothetical. But I used to be a middle school teacher. Let's say that I have a belief that middle school students should wear uniforms. Right? This is my belief. Triangle. Triangle means uniforms. My triangle is held up by any number of supporting arguments. Right? I could believe that in the end it's cheaper. I could believe that it helps with like school pride and school spirit. I could believe that it prevents bullying across socioeconomic like class divides. I could believe that it like prevents teenage pregnancy or something like that. I don't know. There are all kinds of beliefs that people offer up, right? Turns out, empirically, a surprising amount of the time, most of us think that our beliefs hinge on like a complicated mixture of like 12 different things. Turns out, from doing this at CFAR workshops for the last year or two, a surprising number of the time, there's really only one crucial pillar under the belief. Or like sometimes there are two. Sometimes there are two. But like actually, in point of fact, it's like, okay, I believe that people should wear uniforms in middle school because it's going to end up being cheaper, and somebody's like, actually, I ran the numbers, here's a study, not cheaper, change your mind? I'm like, nah, I don't change my mind. Like I claimed that that was my reason for the belief, but like secretly that's not the thing, right? So there's an important thing in being able to figure out what's actually upholding your belief. Have you ever had the experience of being in a debate or an argument with somebody, and they like go down a rabbit hole and provide this like really deep and detailed, compelling argument about this like underlying thing, and the whole time you're just kind of like, and they get to the end of it and you're like, yep, I concede all of the points you just made, but I don't change my mind because that like wasn't actually the thing. Yeah? Double crux is trying to short circuit that because we don't want to waste your time, we don't want to waste their time, right? You want to like actually zero the argument in on the things that matter. And so the question here, with our horrible acronym, is what would cause me to change my mind? I make fun of my colleague for writing that every time. It's great. What would cause me to change my mind? So the parable here is like, let's say you have a belief that all ravens are black. There's no such thing as a white raven, right? And so like you go about demonstrating this belief by like, there's a black raven. Yes. There's a black raven. Yes. There's a black raven. Yes. Right? You guys know the phrase confirmation bias? But like there's also like the mythical island of white ravens, which is just like in San Francisco Bay, and I could just like take a ferry out there. But I like, nope, I just can like keep counting black ravens over here, right? Like obviously what I should do is I should go to the Isle of White Ravens and like look for white ravens, right? Because in fact, each black raven that I see is marginal evidence, but it's like really weak evidence. If I go to where my belief might be overturned, and I check, like one of two things will happen. Either there will be a white raven, and like great, I can update toward truth. Now my belief is correct where before it was false. Or like I went to the place, I looked, there were no white ravens. Like the black ravens on that island are much stronger evidence. Does that make sense? So what would cause you to change your mind? We have like a little sheet that we hand out at CFAR workshops that is full of just incredibly controversial stuff about like politics, about religion, about gender, about like how the government should spend money, all these like complicated things. We get people to pre-commit to their beliefs, and then we like put them in a Thunderdome, and they have to fight, right? But the first thing I want you to do is like find the crux of your belief. So, okay, this is like a notably different move from like wishful thinking, or from like social maneuvering, or from like being eloquent and clever, right? Like, if I were to ask the question, is Donald Trump going to be reelected in 2020? There's like a clear, like chest-thumping, virtuous, like, of course not, right? Like, we are going to correct course as a nation. And like, you get social points for like loudly signaling your virtue, right? And if you're in a different part of the country, you get different points for loudly like, of course he is. He's like doing all the right things. And like, we got him in the first time and we're going to get him in the second time, right? Like, either way. But like, that's not actually, like, think in your head. Do you believe, like, would you, if I were to ask you to bet $1, would you bet on Donald Trump being reelected in 2020? Or would you bet on Donald Trump not being reelected in 2020? Take a minute to think. Not a whole minute. And now for some of you, this might be the very first time you've actually considered that question, so your belief is probably held very lightly. You don't have like super strong convictions. But like, what would cause you to change your mind? Right? Like, whatever belief you establish. Maybe you believe that he will be elected because you believe that, like, generally speaking, the country runs itself and the president doesn't do very much, and like, things are going to just kind of go the way that they always go. And so like, he'll be elected because that's what happens. We've had a whole bunch of 8-year presidents, and like, we're probably going to have another 8-year president. And then you find that, like, okay, if there was a major disruption, right, if the economy crashed, or if another war happened, then I would flip my belief, because my belief is sort of based on, like, everyday status quo. Or maybe you have the belief that, like, no, he's definitely not going to get reelected. Like, all of the blue counties and blue states, there's going to be, like, a large grassroots movement. And like, people are generally going to mobilize much more strongly than they did in 2016, and there'll be like a much bigger pushback, and there will be like a much better candidate in 2020, and so he's going to lose. And like, what would cause me to change my mind? I noticed that, like, oh, if that grassroots movement failed to materialize, and everybody just like got bored or like didn't care, then like I would change my mind. It's like seeking your cruxes. Make sense so far? So one, I want to install a tapping you, which is like, notice I have a belief, ask myself what would cause me to change my mind, right? Or another tap, notice that somebody else has a different belief, ask myself what do they see that I don't? Because in point of fact, like, most people aren't incredibly stupid and evil, and like, if they came out with circle, it's because they like have had different experiences, and like those different experiences have led them to conclude circle. And in fact, if you had been like dropped into their life as a baby and had lived their entire life, you would probably also think circle. Oh my goodness, right? So what double crux actually is as a technique is two people having a disagreement, and what they're trying to do is agree on a single if-then statement. Secretly is a pair of if-then statements. Along the lines of, okay, person A, I think middle school students should wear uniforms. But if it turns out that uniforms don't reduce bullying, then I would abandon my belief and say that they shouldn't wear uniforms. And person B is thinking, I believe middle school students shouldn't wear uniforms. But if it turned out that they had a significant impact on bullying, I would switch my belief and like agree, right? And so in this case, the two people have come to agree not about the object level of the universe, but about its causal nature. We don't actually know the answers to the question of like whether or not uniforms influence bullying, but we both agree that that is the crucial question, that like it should swing one way or the other based on the answer to that question. Does it make sense? So in this case, double crux means you don't win by like convincing the other person to update their beliefs, right? What it means is that you win by enriching your causal model of the universe. Somebody has a crazy different belief from you, and you're like, like, why do they believe that? Like, what's under that belief? And like, underneath that belief, is there anything useful that I can incorporate into my worldview? Because like, the world is this giant, complicated maze. I always hope that when I'm doing this maze drawing, I don't accidentally draw anything that looks like a swastika. But like, it's this giant, complicated maze. Did I already fail? Oh no. right? And I'm like over here, right? I'm like that big, and I've seen in my lifetime like this much of the maze, right? And you're like over here, and you have seen in your lifetime like this much of the maze. And if we both disagree about like which way to go when you're standing right here, like go that way or go that way, right? Like we're gonna be much better off if we can actually like swap our notes than if it's just like, I think it's left, and if you think it's right, then you're just wrong. You're just like dumb. Like, I'm sorry that you're just so dumb, but like literally all of my experience is telling me we need to go left. And you're like, all of my experience is telling me we need to go right. And like the solution is, don't let your anecdotal erase their anecdotal data. Like don't let your stories erase their stories, and also don't let their stories erase your stories. Combine the stories, and like now if you have done that, suddenly you both have access to like this much of the map, which is way better. Like if you want to understand how the universe works and find out where all the levers and switches and buttons are, so you can like know actually what things to do to cause your values to come into existence to like make everything good forever, then you definitely want as much data as possible, right? And in fact, the people who strongly disagree with you are the most interesting, because they're the ones who are most likely to know about the island of the White Ravens that you haven't visited yet. And like, you could just have to like go visit every single island of the White Ravens, or you could like buddy up to the people who've already been there and be like, yo, so I heard you went to this island. Were there like actually any White Ravens there? And like in a spirit of curiosity, like what's going on in your black box? This is the roots of double crux. Again, if you want the actual algorithm, it is hidden in this document, secretly hidden in the chapter titled Double Crux. But yeah, so these are 3 techniques. Take 10 seconds, reconnect with taps, trigger action playing. Do you remember what the heck that was? Was there anything useful there that you want to steal? Cool. Take 10 seconds, reconnect with what I tried to show you about goal factoring. What was the problem I was pointing at? What was the general thrust of the solution? Does this seem like it's useful for your life? And double crux, think about those black boxes. Think about all those silly mistakes that we make as humans. See if you can do better. See if the next time you like feel yourself ramping up into aggressive confidence because you're right and you're going to show them, damn it. See if you can like avoid those 3 error modes that I outlined, and instead ask questions like, what do you see that I don't? Or what would cause me to change my mind? Cool. Questions, comments, snide remarks? Raise your hand to the extent that this was useful for you. A worthwhile way to spend an hour and a half. You can be honest. This is useful data for me. And as well, let me know.
Up here.
Sweet. All right. At this point, here's what we're going to do. We're all going to stand up and stretch for 20 seconds so that anybody who wants to sneak out doesn't feel socially awkward doing so. And then I'm going to shout, sit back down if you want to, and people who have further questions can sit back down. So we stand up. Thank you for coming. I hope this was good. I look forward to the next slide. And actually mill around. Don't look at the people who are leaving. It's not their fault. They have good things to get to.
If you haven't arrived yet, please go to the back and do that. Otherwise, yeah, feel free to leave.
Yeah. Cool.
It's awesome.
Right. And if you want to sit back down, if you wanted to come closer, feel free. I have an extra 15 minutes before I got to run away. So anybody who has further questions is welcome to ask them. Not much, how are you? Jan, right?
Yeah.
I'm that much more likely to remember it next time.
I was going to ask, what's CFAR's policy on the handbook, being consistent in the general population right now?
We generally don't want it published on the internet. We don't want to cut up into fragments and scatter fluids. But we're experimenting with spreading our information but more readily. In the past, the handbook was badly written enough that we were scared that like letting it out would cause people to develop false rationality. And then, like, in addition to thinking the CFAR didn't know anything, they would also like be doing the wrong mental motion. We've recently, within the last year, we upgraded the handbook enough that we're like comfortable letting it out in limited circumstances. So we've actually got an experiment running right now. There are a bunch of people on Slate Star Codex who are like really skeptical of the rationality community. And so we have a study going where we gave the same pre-workshop survey that we give to our participants to 30 random Slate Star Codex users, and we gave them the handbook. And 6 months from now, we're going to give them the same survey that we give people after the workshop, like 6 months after the workshop, see if they've had like any positive growth as a result.
Right. Oh, so that's okay. I asked because I happened to I got the handbook and it was like 3 people removed from the source at that point.
Yeah, we're not
and,
thrilled about that, but we're not like too scared.
All I knew was that there was something to do with the survey, and I was like, oh,
yep,
I don't know what to do with this.
That's what it was.
Like, I'm going to read it. I'm gonna look at it.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know what I should do with it otherwise.
Yeah.
So for the double crux,
Yeah.
let's say something like someone said something that you like really disagree with. At what point do you like disengage from that discussion?
Okay. So one important thing that we like really underline in the CFAR workshop is that double crux is like a sometimes snack, and you really can't always do it unilaterally. Right, like if somebody else is just like hardline on their thing, and they're like, there's a way in which there's a wrong way to try to make a conversation more double cruxy, which is like somebody's like giving you their hardline opinion and they're kind of aggressive and they seem kind of set in their ways, and you're like, well, I think this conversation would be more productive if you like expose to me the foundations of your beliefs so we can like pick at them. That sounds like a trap. Right? So usually what I try to do in those circumstances is I try to model what I want to see. I like try to give them some of my cruxes and sort of like, hey, I'm like unconvinced of your side. If you wanted to change my mind, you would need to speak to like these 2 things. Like I have these 2 underlying beliefs that are causing me to be skeptical of your stance. Do you have anything to say about those 2 things? And then like, if that goes well, then maybe I ask them to do the same in return. But if they just like take that as a chance to be smug and know it all, then I usually just like nod and say thank you and then walk away. The key thing though, like, we have a whole class on a thing called the good faith principle, which is basically like trying to hammer in the idea that very few people are evil. And like, even if like 30% of the people in the world are evil, there's like so much confirmation bias and like so much in the way of like thinking that we have good evidence that when we don't, they're like, you're generally better off if you can afford to take the risk to just like assume that everyone is good. And so that's like, if I get evidence that somebody's arguing in bad faith, I usually like note in my head, like, I, an ape, think that I have conclusive evidence that this person is acting in bad faith. And then I like consciously decide to wait until I get 2 more bits of evidence, right? Just to like correct for my own bias. Do you guys know the Douglas Adams story?
Which one?
Story.
All right, this is actually worth the 3 minutes it's going to take me to tell it. So Douglas Adams, he put this story in one of his books, but he reports that it was a true story. He had to go somewhere.
Oh.
He was at the train station. Yeah. So he arrived early for his train. And he sat down in the cafeteria, and he had his little like packet of cookies, his newspaper. And it was a crowded day, so like another person came up and sat down at the same table, which is fine. Like you guys have been in airports and stuff before. Crowded day, right? You don't think twice. Somebody else sits at your table. And then an extraordinary thing happened, which was that this person reached over, all the way over, and picked up Douglas Adams's package of cookies and opened it and took out a cookie and ate it. At which point Douglas Adams did what he said. I think the exact phrase is what any full-blooded Englishman would do, which was he said nothing, but like glared at the guy and like very deliberately reached over to the package of cookies and took out a cookie and ate it. And then the guy did it again. Like this was not a sufficient intervention. The guy like just like didn't care or whatever, like some kind of like what even is happening they just went back and forth like this for 10 minutes in total silence with like the air, like the tension in the air as thick as molasses until all the cookies were gone. And then this guy got up and left, like his train, you know, he like got up, left. And Douglas Adams was still there, like, what the, like, who even does this? Oh my God, right? And then it came time for Douglas Adams to get up, so he like stands up and like picked up his briefcase, picked up his newspaper, and underneath his newspaper was his package of cookies. Like this guy went home and like told his family, like, you won't even believe what happened to me at the train station today. I opened up my cookies and this jackass just like, and so we tell this story at workshops to remind, like the actual handle that we put on this, it's like Blue's Clues. It's like a silly little handle. But the handle is swap the eyebrows. Like when you find yourself tempted to assign like evil villain eyebrows to someone and like beleaguered victim, innocent, good person, angel halo eyebrows to yourself. Like see if you can construct a coherent story that's the opposite. I did the math one time. I'm not claiming this is plausible. I'm only claiming that it is like possible. There's like, I came up with something like a 10 to 15% chance. Given the number of people that drive through the Bay Area every day and the rate of mistakes that I consider like acceptable on behalf of a good driver, like I make a mistake like every quarter or so, that's like pretty rough, and like somebody honks at me and I'm like, I deserve it. You know? Given that rate, it is in fact possible that I have never been deliberately wronged in traffic. That like literally every single time I've been cut off or like otherwise abused in traffic, it was like it was some actually good driver making their one mistake of the quarter. Like I took the rate of how often this happens to me, and it's possible that like everyone's just good. Like a 15% chance, but it like warms my heart to think about it. So that was a long answer to your question, but basically what I would say is take your natural inclination and then like give people one extra chance or two extra chances, and then then you can just cut it off and walk away. Yeah.
How would you suggest applying double crux to like a religious argument?
So I have like a 25-page handwritten letter to my dad sitting in a drawer. I think practically my answer is don't. That like that's one of those ones that cuts really close to people's identity, and I haven't heard of anybody who's like successfully navigated this one. But I think if you're going to give it a shot anyway, like the thing that I'm trying to do in this 25-page letter to my dad is like start by establishing like, first of all, expose your entire belief structure. Like let them see all of it, even all the way down to like how do we decide what is truth? Like is empiricism valid? Is induction valid? Like go ahead and lay those out there as like these are my premises, and then go from there. Because I think that like a lot of the time people are actually religious for instrumental reasons rather than epistemic ones, and an epistemic argument is not actually going to be sufficient to change their mind. The other thing I would say is if you're going to approach the religious argument, really truly take to heart the, like what would cause me to change my mind. Like don't go into it assuming that you're right. I personally bet against religion, but like I can come up with plausible things that would cause me to change my mind and admit that I was wrong all along, and that like X religion or Y religion or Z religion was true. And so like really embracing that spirit of uncertainty and like, yep, I know it's hard for me personally, but like I can think of things that would cause me to change. Like if I was spoken to by a voice of God and also I went to get tested for schizophrenia and like the test came out negative, and like also I had not like taken any substances or missed any sleep or anything, like if I was completely in my right mind according to objective tests and also I received like voices of God, then like yes, I would change my mind. I would do it. And like having that sort of approach goes a long way. Yeah.
Could you yeah. Well, my question will take a long time to respond to. We should respond to that one first.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how has your journey through rationality changed how you view like what social good is? Or has it?
Yeah, it has. It's mainly made me like it's become a lot more like seeing the Matrix, kind of like seeing all the lines of like, oh, like I see this person. I have hypotheses about why they were doing that. Like they were feeling threatened, and so they responded by X. And like, it's just caused me to be generally a lot more sympathetic toward all the other people who are like frantically mashing buttons trying to win the same video game that I'm trying to win. And like nobody knows what the buttons do, and we're like, try this button and see if it works. So mainly it's given me like a lot more sympathy for everybody else who's also trying to figure this out. And then we'll go back to you. Did you have one? Yeah.
Yeah, why does CFAR exist?
So CFAR exists to try to achieve what we're calling existential win. The idea is that like there's so much research about all the ways that human thinking is broken, and so many of the problems of humanity have been caused by human thinking and human action, and there are very few, like we posit that all of the problems caused by humans can be solved by humans, but there's like a lot of problems where nobody's even bothering to look for a solution or bothering to check. So everybody who works at CFAR is there to prevent existential risks and like try to achieve existential success. So we want poverty to end, we want everyone to be free, we want everyone to live 200 or 300 or 400 or 1,000 year lifespans. We want to like prevent the extinction of species. We want to like see the world be as good as possible. And in the short term, we believe that there are like a handful of strong crises in the way. Things like a few decades or centuries out, global warming is a problem that could kill us all. Closer on timelines than that, there's things like nuclear war risk persists. Bioterrorism is getting like more and more dangerous. Artificial intelligence X risk is like the largest one. Most people at CFAR are convinced that artificial intelligence is like the largest problem to be addressed in the near future. But we're focused on AI in particular just because it seems close and tractable, not because we're like fundamentally about AI. We're fundamentally about like avert all the catastrophes and like achieve all the victories. And we suspect that this is going to be best done by like improving the human ability to think and reason. And so we're trying to like figure out how the whole thinking and reasoning thing actually works, and like try to level up a few hundred or a few thousand people to like solve the problems that we don't, so then we're not like alone trying to solve them.
Yeah, so my question was, could you work through an entire example of Goal Factory? I think you kind of did this with your example about like creating papers, but you didn't go into too much detail.
Yeah. Does anybody have a different question before we do that? No, we got through it. Yeah. So why don't you catch up with me one-on-one, and
Sure.
I'll do that.
It
Yeah.
was it was just a super quick thing.
Yeah.
You mentioned at one point, like, for example, the thing where if you checked your Facebook, you noticed you were checking your Facebook, how to not make yourself feel guilty.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Oh, like how to?
Yeah, like how do you not like beat yourself up about it?
Yeah, okay. So the like shortcut is take the word of the authority, Duncan Sabien, whose email has @rationality.org, who says it like, in fact, you'll get further if you don't beat yourself up. Like that's the shortcut. It's like empirically you'll get further if you don't beat yourself up. But the like longer answer is there's a thing called hyperbolic discounting, where this is effect size, and this is proximity, where by proximity I mean how close was the punishment or reward to the behavior. So like the reason that people use clickers to train dogs, the way that you use a clicker to train a dog is first you get them to associate a click with a treat, right? So like click and treat, and they're like, oh, sweet, click and treat. And you do that for like a week or two until like click produces like a dopamine spike in the dog's head. The reason people use the clicker instead of just directly giving the dog a treat is because directly giving the dog a treat takes about 1.1 seconds, and using the clicker takes about 0.3 seconds. And the difference between 1.1 seconds and 0.3 seconds is like this big, right? There's like a huge difference here. So like being proximal to the behavior makes a big deal. So if you try to punish the mistake, if you try to like, I made the mistake, you like are like slapping yourself sort of in the moment. But the mistake was over here, right? And then the noticing was here, and then the punishment was here, right? And like your brain doesn't know that the punishment was for the mistake. All it knows is like it did a thing and then it received pain, right? And so like, despite the fact that you intend for the punishment to prevent you from making the mistake, in point of fact, the punishment has a much larger effect on the immediately proximal action. And so like, if you want an overall strategy, like overall, do you buy that noticing is going to be valuable? Yeah. So you don't want to disincentivize it.
Okay. So you just tell yourself that.
Yeah. Or just like remind yourself of the truth of this fact. They're like, hey, actually, like the mistake was bad. I'm not saying the mistake was bad, but like noticing it was actually a good thing. And the more I notice, the less likely I am to do this in the future. Like it's, yeah, I don't ever endorse a strategy of lying to yourself. Like I think truth actually matters. And so what I would do is I would focus on the true thing that like noticing will in fact help. And you can even do both. You can be like, okay, brain, I know that we really want to feel guilty about this mistake. Let's postpone that for 2 seconds. First, good job for noticing. Now let's feel guilty. Like you can actually just do that. That's also fine. Yeah.
So I guess I've learned about taps a couple times now, and I guess I've been too unmotivated to try to make them work.
Okay.
And I feel like I've almost developed a tap against improving myself. Like
Okay.
whenever I think, okay, let's do this thing that'll eventually make myself better,
Right.
I feel this like deep aversion almost.
You're not alone, first of all. Many people have been in your shoes. Some of them made it out of the trap and some of them didn't. So like either way you end up, you're in good company. But I have a recommendation, which is my colleague Anna. So at its core, like taps, the goal of taps is basically like you're pre-deciding what actions are going to be good and what aren't, right? You're pre-deciding. I think taking the stairs would be healthier than taking the elevator, that sort of thing, right? So what I would recommend is what my colleague Anna does. Every quarter or so, sometimes every 6 months, she sits down for an hour. She takes out a piece of paper or opens up a new document, and she makes a list of like 200 taps that she just, in the abstract, thinks would be good. Like, you know, when Carl makes that face, I will count to 3 instead of getting angry. You know, like, oh, when I get a parking ticket, I will like immediately log it in my to-do system instead of hiding it in the drawer and pretending it doesn't exist. She just like makes 200 taps, right? And she writes them all down on a list, and then she puts the list in a drawer and ignores it for 6 months. And then 6 months later, she like pulls the list out of the drawer and she says that she has found that usually she's just like automatically doing 2/3 of them without any of like, I will do the virtuous thing. Like there's a, if you like set out to do it and then you fail, then this hurts and is demoralizing. But if you just like kind of casually are like, yeah, let me just think ahead to like how I think I ought to act. But like no pressure, I'm just like theorizing, I'm just hypothesizing. I think in this situation it would probably be best for my goals if I acted like that. And I think in this situation it would probably be best for my goals if I acted like that. I would try that. And then check in with yourself 6 months from now and see if that ended up being any less aversive or stressful. Just like pick an afternoon where you're really feeling good, or like a friend that wants to do it with you, and just like do it as a strictly hypothetical activity where there's no like skin in the game, no stress, and then just see what happens. I often find that if you've been taking sort of like a virtuous, moralistic, black or white stance, and this hasn't been working, a good shift is over into the like curiosity, see what happens. I'm a mad scientist, I'm gonna run an experiment. And like if that doesn't work, there are like other places to go beyond that too. You gotta come to a CFAR workshop. Any others? Yeah.
So what's the AI? Why is that a threat?
Oh, long list of, so first of all, there are many smart, intelligent, capable people who disagree, including those who are in the field and are professionals and know what they're talking about. But short answer is that think about the impact that humans have had on the world, and most of that impact has come through innovation and technology. And if you automate the process of creating new innovations and new technologies, a la machine learning, a la factories that build factories, or like programs that write programs, you don't even have to worry about like sentience or ill will to get into a situation where like something has a goal, and it's pursuing it single-mindedly because that's what computer programs do. You told it to like make a bunch of paper clips, and if it's sufficiently sophisticated and like aware enough to model its environment, then it like realizes that in order to make the maximum number of paper clips, first it's got to like help humanity develop space shuttles to get off the planet, so they can then kill all the humans and take all the planets and turn them all into paper clips. That's the short answer.
Okay.
And the idea here is not that this is necessarily an overwhelmingly large risk. Like one of the questions is, okay, almost everybody admits that this is the sort of thing that could happen, and a lot of the disagreement is like, okay, are the odds 0.000001%? Or are the odds like 1%? Right? And like the difference between what you think here and here, like these suggest very different strategies. A 1% risk of like the worst possible thing ever seems totally worth spending some cycles like heading off at the pass. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You mentioned like checking in with your physical state a lot. Is this just to say like, oh, this is like a bad thing and my gut reactions to this stuff, or like?
That's part of it. The reference here to look up is, well, I don't have, I wanted to write in my green marker. Gendlin's Focusing. There's an audiobook about this. Gendlin's Focusing technique. The basic idea is that your body's processing a lot of information. Your like autonomic nervous system that like decides whether or not to dump adrenaline into your system or whether or not to like focus on digestion. There's like a lot going on beneath the surface, and you can sort of use that to fill in gaps in your metacognition. Like, have you ever had the experience of like noticing that you just shouted, "I'm not angry," right? There's a thing there where like, right? And so by being aware of what your body's doing, often anxiety lives in things like your digestive tract. Like you get like knots in your stomach, and you can, if you pay close attention, you can get the close shadow of that, of like, yeah, no, like, I'm not worried about my relationship with Steve, it's fine. And then you like, notice the like, and then like just using that as data, basically. We try not to like decide what's going on there, but like, oh, like my stomach did a thing. Is that because, is it like something to do with like security of attachment? Like, am I scared that it's that like they're gonna leave me? And then like sometimes the sensation shifts, and just like noticing that the sensation shift when you like have that hypothesis, like, oh, there's like some part of my subconscious that was like causing this reaction in my stomach in the first place is now causing a different reaction because I had a different thought. And just like taking all of that as data and not throwing it out. Like if you live entirely in your head and have Vulcan ears, then it just seems like you're throwing away a chance to like, it's like weather vanes. Yeah. Okay, I have to go soon, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run through a quick example of goal factoring. Anybody who wants to see that is welcome to. Anybody who doesn't is welcome to leave. And again, if you have questions, feel free to email me, Duncan@rationality.org. Also, people routinely get like more than $10,000 worth of value out of our workshop that costs about $4,000, and financial aid is available. So that's the sort of thing that you might be interested. It's pretty low cost to like go onto the website, fill out a 3-minute form, and like have a quick Skype chat with one of the employees. Like keep that in mind as well. I'll take one last question.
So you said $10,000 worth. How did you quantify that?
We asked the people who've been to the workshop.
Oh.
We also asked them 6 months later, when like the initial glow of how wonderful this was had faded, and they could like see whether their life was actually better. Yeah, we've got like data that we can share if you're interested. Yeah.
I thought CFAR was trying to like maybe be more selective with its participants. Is it still open to just like general?
CFAR is open to absolutely everybody. We are more selective with our financial aid, basically. Anybody who wants to pay, as long as they're not like clearly crazy or like clearly a bad cultural fit, is welcome at the workshops. And then the financial aid goes basically toward people that we expect to have a positive impact on one of the world's most important problems, which includes AI. We're like heavily focused on AI, but it also includes people who are focused on poverty, people who are focused on space exploration, people who are focused on longevity research, people who are doing the more meta thing, like they're focused on policy in general and like lobbying. Like anybody that we suspect is in the fight on behalf of all humanity is somebody that we want to level up. even if they disagree with us about like how that fight should go.
So do you guys also run Spark? That's on your campus?
We're affiliated with Spark. The people who run Spark have been through CFAR and are CFAR instructors. Did you have one last thing? I keep lying about whether it's the last thing.
Are you open, is your facility open for visits, or does that even make sense?
Yeah, the CFAR office at 2030 Addison Street, just a few blocks from here. 2030 Addison Street on the 7th floor. It is locked, but if you like go over to the side next to the elevator and push the little buzzer, we'll let you up. There's a community lounge where people can chill. There's a large event going on this Friday called Project Hufflepuff.
The Unconference.
Yeah, the Unconference for Project Hufflepuff, where this like community full of Ravenclaws has realized that maybe they need some Hufflepuff virtue. Stuff like that goes on all the time.
I thought we were Slytherins.
Some of us are Slytherins. Okay, goal factoring. Question is, should I go to the party? I'm sorry for the like trivial example, but this is kind of like lifting weights with no weight on the bar. You like build form on a simple, easy thing, and then you can eventually use it on like, should I get a PhD or not? Right? Okay, so should I go to the party? The question is like, okay. What's good about going to the party? Okay, if I go to the party, I'll get to see Nate. Nate never comes out of his hole. I get to see him like once every 6 weeks. Nate goes to parties, because when he goes to parties, he can see like 20 people in one shot. So like, it's my only chance to see Nate. If I go to the party, there's like a 10% chance that I'll meet somebody new and interesting, and I'm like not currently in a relationship. So there's like 0.1 odds that I'll meet somebody new and cool. If I go to the party, okay, Tilia has been giving me dirty looks every time I don't go to the party. So I can like absolve some social shame. I can like get rid of some of my obligation to like be a part of the community and like support it explicitly and overtly. Borson cheese. Gosh, I love that cheese. It's like so good and it's so expensive and I can never buy it myself, but they usually have it at the party. Okay, what else? There's like feeling good. Like usually I don't feel like it, but once I get there, I feel better. So like I'm a little bit depressed, and it might like ameliorate depression a little bit. Like once I actually get out there, it might ameliorate the blues. What else? Dancing. There's like dancing at this party, and there's somebody there who can teach me how to dance, and I've been putting that off. What else? Okay, so like I think I've scraped the bottom of the barrel. So now what I do is I imagine that there is like a genie, and what the genie is going to do is the genie is going to give me this, and this. But then they're going to push a button that makes me like forbidden from going to the party. I get those 6 things, but I am not allowed to go to the party no matter what. And like, what I do is I check to see like, okay, here's the button. Am I going to push this button? Or like, I get those things, but there's no party. Is there any problem? And usually like right around here, everybody's like, yeah, no problem. But when you get like right there at the last second, they're like, oh, so like, here, I actually do it. Okay. Borson. Okay. So. Nope. Okay, got it. Okay. So there's like Steph runs these like truth or dare games that are just like awesome. It's just like really good, and it's just fantastic. And if I don't go to the party, the next party, like yeah, okay. So that's like an important thing. And like again, sometimes do the check. Like, is there anything else? Okay. Boom. So I have all the goods. These are the goods. Now I look for the bads. What are the aversions? What are the things that are preventing me from going to the party? Okay, so for one, I like hate when there are like 50 plus people just milling around. Like introvert hatred kind of thing, right? It's just like no good. Introvert, okay. So that's a blocking arrow. That's a bad. I hate it. I just don't like the parties. Another is like, well, I'll have to see Tilia's face. Right? There's this thing that human brains do, where, right? We're like, okay, I have a goal of like not seeing the person who's angry at me. I know I just like literally won't ever see him. That'll solve the problem, right? So like, I'm like, this is like, okay, maybe I'll get a point from Tilia, but like I'll still have to own up to the fact that I didn't come to the last 12 parties. So like, yeah, it's a blocking error. What else? Okay, there will be pressure to drink. I don't usually drink, but Steph encourages everybody to get drunk when they play the truth or dare thing. So there's gonna be like pressure to drink. Loud music. I just don't like having to shout. The conversations will be boring. Like even if I see Nate, he's gonna be busy like saying to a group of 10 people that thing that I've already heard him say 8 times to 8 other groups of 10 people. Sleep deprived. I wanted to go do some parkour tomorrow, and my like training will be impaired by the fact that I stayed up until 2 in the morning. Oh, interesting. Gas? Like didn't even know that gas was a thing. Like apparently that's a blocker. Is there any other reason not to go to the party?
You have work to do?
Yeah. Well, I don't, but I'm gonna put that up here just because that's a good example. Like work on the project, work to do. I actually found one more, which is that like if I go to the party, it'll seem like I endorse these sorts of parties, which I don't. And if I like boycott them, maybe it'll stop happening. Okay. So these are the bads. Okay. If you look in the handbook, there are actually 2 separate classes. One is called goal factoring and one is called aversion factoring. And so we used to actually handle the bads and the goods separately. And so you'll see that I'm squishing together 2 techniques here, right? So handling the aversions and like achieving the goods used to be 2 separate techniques. We smushed them together. So for handling the aversions, there's a handful of things. So there's like compromise. There's like schemes and plots. There's like leveling up. So these are like general categories of ways that I can solve problems. So like pressure to drink, a scheme or a plot for pressure to drink. Does everybody get it just off me saying that? Ginger ale. 1 glass full of ginger ale. Right? That's like a scheme. It's like a plot. Ain't nobody gonna pressure me to drink. Or like another scheme or plot could be like as simple as, okay, buy earplugs. Right? Like I'm just thinking outside the box, like, okay, how can I make this experience less terrible for me? So a compromise, or like an 80-20, right? The compromise could be like, okay, I'll only go for an hour or 2. Like I will set an alarm on my phone, like, okay, time to leave, right? So I like go to the party, but not so long that it's bad. Another compromise is that I'll go to the party, but I will be rude. I will just straight up be like, I don't want to talk about this. Let's talk about that instead. I'll just like do it. Because like, who cares? If they don't like it, they just won't invite me to the next party. I didn't even want to go to the party in the first place. They'll be like, this conversation bores me. Let's talk about something else, right? So now it'll be less boring because I'll be like 20% more rude and it'll be 80% less boring, right? Or like leveling up. Okay, yeah. So there's another CFAR class called comfort zone expansion, right? I like have this thing here, and this is like maybe I can kind of frame it. It feels a little bit like a weakness to me. Like I wish I wasn't so sensitive to the parties of like everybody else seems to enjoy it. Like why am I the only one who hates it? So like leveling up, I can like explicitly view this as an opportunity to practice and like kind of put on my like, I'm going to pretend that I'm, somebody who doesn't have this problem. Like I'm going to pretend that I'm, who doesn't have this problem? Leia from Star Wars. Leia from Star Wars does not mind if there are 50 other people at the party because she's like a senator and a princess and stuff. So I'll just like pretend that I'm like, yeah, I'm the sort of person who likes this. And I'll just sort of like dip my toe in it, right? Like I'm not actually trying to make myself like the party. What I'm doing is I'm like trying on the experience of being someone who likes to party. And then at the end of the night, I can like check in with myself and be like, nope, that was violating, never do it again. Or maybe like, oh, that kind of was cool. Maybe I could like expand my comfort zone a little bit, right? So there are all of these things that we can do, and I basically want to like go through and try to address each one of them, at least in theory, right? At least hypothetically. I could solve the gas problem by like bumming a ride. Be like, Steve, I know you're getting an Uber, Steve. I know you're getting an Uber. Can I just like, you know, just come on, pick me up. Come on, pick me up. You can do it, right? And so like, that's to handle all of the aversions, right? Oh yeah, there's one more. There's one more. This is an advanced technique. No, like it's actually an advanced technique. Do you guys know what exposure therapy is? It's where you like repeatedly expose yourself to an aversive stimulus, and your negative response peaks, and you like wait until your negative response drops a little bit, and then like the next day again, same deal. Expose yourself to the stimulus. Your like response doesn't go up quite as high. So maybe you like expose yourself to a more extreme version of it. So first it's like, I have arachnophobia, and somebody like, okay, there's a photograph of the spider somewhere in the room, and I'm like, I don't like it. And I just like wait until I chill out a little bit. And then the next day they're like, now there's a plastic spider somewhere in the room. It's like 3D, right? The problem with exposure therapy is it works regardless of whether it's a good idea or not. So you can take germaphobes and like get them to the point where they're actually just like fully comfortable licking public toilet seats. This has actually been done. So that's what I mean when I say it's an advanced technique. You can just push the get over it button, but you should make sure that you're pushing it in the right moment. Because if you just like do this all the time, you're going to end up in some really bad rabbit holes. Make sense? Like you're going to end up doing things that are in fact violating to yourself, and you like won't notice until like years later, and you like explode and you're angry at your past self. Okay, so those are all the aversions. Next, all of the goods. Okay, Borson. They have Borson at CFAR workshops because I am an employee of CFAR, and they like get my special treat. So I can just like wait. They'll get that at the next CFAR workshop, which is on May 3rd. That's like only a week from now. I can wait a week to get my Borson. That's fine. I have Steph's number. I know Steph. We're good friends. If I just ask Steph, she will probably set up a truth or dare like on a different date. Or alternately, Alex Ray will also do this. Alex Ray will also perform this service for me. Obligation. Okay, so no joke, Tilia's party, they usually like crowdsource the like buying the food or whatever, or if there's like any kind of, like if they purchase a movie off of Google Play, then like everybody chips in a nickel or something. Right, so there's like a pot of money that people, so I could just like, instead of going to the party, I could just pay Tilia $10 to like not glare at me. This will literally just work. Like if $10 is smaller to me than the aversion of having her glare at me, I could just straight up do that. I could just donate $10 to every party I don't go to, and she'll be like, oh, "Thank you so much." You know, this is great. Dancing. Do I care about dancing? I could just not care about dancing, or I could ask Chao Chu or Eric. Chao Chu and Eric are both like dancing enthusiasts, and they will like do some dancing with me at a different time. 1% odds of meeting new people. I could take the list of people that I like know that I want to meet that have been like kind of interesting on the fringes, and I could just like send 10 emails. And I could even cheat. I could just be like, yo, should we hang out sometime this month? And then just like copy paste that into all 10. Just like very low cost, right? I could even just like not even pay attention as I'm clicking send. Oh, too late, it's done. You know? Or you could like set it to boomerang for half an hour. Because like it's getting set half an hour from now. I have plenty of time to stop it and then go take a shower. Right? There's like, I'm like being tricksy, you know? Nate. I could just cash it in. I mean, like, Nate, it was my birthday last week and you missed it. You have to come over to my house. You owe me. The blues. Okay. What else ameliorates the blues? Okay, so there is ice cream.
CFAR workshop.
There is. So what is it?
Antidepressants.
There's antidepressants. There's ice cream. There's exercise.
CFAR workshop.
There is CFAR. Well, usually CFAR workshops do ameliorate the blues, although sometimes the blues hit really hard on day 3. Workshop. Actually, ice cream leads to guilt, but exercise plus ice cream leads to not guilt. That's cool. So I could like walk to the grocery store, buy ice cream. I could carry a spoon in my pocket. I could walk to the grocery store, buy a pint of ice cream, and eat it on the way back while the boomerang emails are irrevocably being sent. Yeah. Okay. So now this is like, I've looked at the whole picture. And basically what happens now is one of two things. One, there's like a value of information calculation, right? Like, it's usually not worth it to spend 30 hours deciding which microwave to purchase, right? Like, at a certain point, you like the expected value of like further churning on this problem drops like below what's worth it. So one is I could just like, okay, I've considered all the angles. Am I going to the party or not? 3, 2, 1, final, go. Right, and I could just go. But like having thought through all of this, I'm now more likely to have a positive party experience. I've like looked very closely at like what's going to bother me, and I can like navigate the waters a little better. So instead of just this unconscious feeling of like, ugh, I now know that like, I should avoid Tilia, and I should like try to find a corner off on the side where I don't have to face 50 people, right? So that's one thing I can do. And the other thing that I can do, if I don't feel like I've run up like against diminishing marginal returns, if I feel like it's worth spending another 10 minutes on this problem, is I can now like put together a composite scheme. Like out of all of these plausible things that I've figured out, like what's my like highest value for the least effort, I will do like, okay, I'll do this and this and this. So maybe what I'll do is I'll go to the party, but only for an hour. I'll make sure to have ginger ale. And also on the side, I will email Nate and a few new people, and I will get a ride from Steve. There's like composite plan, almost certainly better than like just going blind or not going blind. Does that make sense? And the cool thing is, just doing this sort of thing, this is me just making a bold claim, but I am going to make this claim. Just practicing this kind of thinking gets easier, in the sense that like the more that you expand your like scheming muscles, the easier it gets. So that when you get to the point where it's like, all right, PhD or quit and like go into industry, I need to goal factor this question, finish my PhD or quit and go into industry. Like, if you've done a bunch of goal factoring up until that point, you will find that you can indeed actually like tease out the problem. Even if it's like, that's like a huge emotional, like, will my parents still love me? Like, will I make money? Like, will I end up, you know, achieving the like professional success that I wanted? Like, there's a lot of heavy stuff in the question of like finish your PhD or not, right? But having like done this a bunch, I have seen people, in fact, goal factor whether or not to finish their PhD, and I've seen people make both decisions. So I don't think that it's like biased to cause people to make one choice or the other. And I've seen the people who made those decisions 6 months out like still be satisfied. Question?
So when you initially introduced this concept, you introduced it in the framework of comparing two options.
Yeah.
So when you're comparing two options, how do you like decide on how to value one thing versus another thing? Because I could probably spend like 5 hours trying to decide whether sitting in my underwear watching Netflix or meeting a girl is like, which one's better?
Yeah, so this is where you get into the like value of information question, right? One of the ways is to try this sort of internal body focusing check, like make a comparison that might hypothetically be correct. Like I think that 5 hours of underwear Netflix is roughly equivalent to a 5% chance of meeting a new girl. And just like, like that doesn't feel false to me. That doesn't feel false. 5 hours of Netflix with underwear feels about like equivalent to a 5, right? You can just like try that sort of thing. And so like, and see what comes up. Another thing that you can try to do is compare to a standard currency. This is an extremely useful trick. I have a standard currency. It is a particular sesame chicken dinner combo. It is available only in Burlington, North Carolina at the restaurant Hong Kong, which is tucked away in like a little strip mall. This sesame chicken dinner combo costs $12, and I will spend the $12 on it every single time. When I go home, I usually eat this like 8 times in the space of 6 days. So like, I have this unit, the Hong Kong dinner combo. It's very sad. For my birthday, somebody like had heard this story and they tried to get me sesame chicken to like make me feel good on my birthday, but of course it wasn't the sesame chicken. Sad pale imitation. But they tried. I love them because they tried. But like I have this thing, and I have this unit of currency, and this can often help make comparisons, right? Like it's hard to compare a cow to a painting, but like we can compare them both in dollars. And you can do the same thing with your own invented currency. So for me, it's the sesame chicken dinner combo. Other currencies that people have said is like a day on the beach with my significant other. They like have this memory as like a benchmark, and they can say like, this feels like a 10th as good as that, or like this feels like it's worth 3 of those. And so like comparing your like innate sense of the like risk reward of going out in search of a new boyfriend or girlfriend, or like, you know, tinkering with your OkCupid profile or whatever, and just like having a sense of how you value your time and how you value your effort. The third thing you can do is literally just assign numbers. Just assign numbers that seem sensible at the time. Do the calculation. Force yourself to go through it. See what is surprising or not surprising when you treat it like you already know it's clear math. And then like once you've made yourself do the calculation, throw out all the numbers and go with your gut. Yeah.
So like with all the like alternatives, how do you keep track of like the trade-offs between those? So like for example, like you could go to like ice cream, or you could do ice cream to ameliorate, to like help with your depression. But like say you had to walk to like the supermarket, but then walking and getting the ice cream
incurs other costs. Yeah, so one of the secrets, we only tell people this on day 4 of the workshop. So if you come to the workshop, you're like ahead of the game. One of the secret things here is that like, again, remember the goal is not the technique, the goal is to think like a rationalist. Every technique has its sort of 5-second version. And so the 5-second version is ignoring all of this in favor of the factor that dominates. Like if you try to do this in pseudo math, like what is a party? And you like list out all the factors. Like one of these parties is going to be like an x cubed. Oh, one of these factors, sorry. One of the factors will be like an x cubed. And then you can like ignore everything that's x squared or x, because like the x cubed term dominates. So like the quick version of goal factoring is being like, okay, party, what's party for? Party is for seeing Nate. What's party against? Party is against my parkour training tomorrow. And just like, done. Like all of the other stuff does matter, but in the sense of looking for a crux. What's the crux of the issue for me? The crux of the issue for me is Nate versus parkour. And like, boom, now I know. And like, if you practice goal factoring, you kind of get good at like making this check. Because then I can do like, I can do the implicit check. Like, I think the party is about Nate versus parkour. Does that feel true? If I could see Nate and do good parkour tomorrow, would I be happy? Yep. Right? And just like, very quick. All right, I'm going to cut it off from there, but bug me on email and come to a CFAR workshop. Real good, I promise. If you bug me on email, I might not answer for the next 2 weeks because I'm going to run a workshop next week. I have to like prepare for it this week and do it next week. But you should feel free to bug me again in 2 weeks and be like, Duncan, come on, you told me to email you and you never answered. And at that point, I will feel sufficient guilt that I'll be like, oh, right, sorry, and I will answer you. Cool. Thanks, everybody, and thank you guys for inviting me.
10 more seconds.
Yeah, what's up?